In the heart of the state-of-the-art, at the dawn of the next stage in entertainment, you found no proscenium.
You have indeed found No Proscenium, the voice of everything immersive. I'm your host, Noah Nelson, and welcome to episode 437 of our ongoing exploration of the immersive cosmos. This week on the show, Rory Mitchell of the Mercantile is here to talk with us about his new augmented reality narrative experience, The Tent, which made a splash at South by Southwest this year and is now on the festival circuit. This one was recorded in person at the Mercantile's downtown LA studio space, and both Rory and I were in fine form that day. Before we get into that, a big piece of news dropped this morning when I'm recording this. Meow Wolf has announced that their next planned permanent exhibition will be in Los Angeles. That's right, LA. Specifically, they are taking over an abandoned movie theater complex. We have so many of those, I don't know which one they might be taking over, and bringing one of the ideas of the late Matt King to life. You can find out more in a feature article in the LA Times by our friend Todd Martins, although there's one little tidbit that I picked up on social today, and that's that Elizabeth Jarrett, whose work LA Immersive heads know from her stints doing production design for Creep and the permanent version of The Nest, is the experience designer on this one. More on the state of Meow Wolf in the closing frame. Coming up on May 18th, we are hosting the world premiere of Siobhan O'Loughlin's Broken Bone Bathtub documentary, chronicling her last pre-pandemic tour of her one-woman show that took place in donated bathrooms across the United States. That premiere will be being held at Thymele Arts in East Hollywood, complete with a Q&A and a mixer afterwards. Tickets are just $25 and no pro backers get a $5 discount. This is our next immersive meetup in LA, and I hope to see you all there. Now, one thing before we get into it, I just want to thank every one of our Patreon backers for their understanding of my needing to pause the newsletter and podcast for a week while I navigated my mom's major surgery and recovery. For the record, she made it through the surgery and recovery is underway, but it has been rocky. There's likely to be some more major upheavals this year, like major upheavals, but I'm just going to take them in the order that they come. I am the personality type that will borrow trouble from the future, so I'm doing my best not to do that. Besides, there's plenty of work in the here and now. Because we didn't make anything in the past week. We didn't get any new backers, but we did get one coming back to the fold. Eva Anderson, thank you for re-upping for the year. Meant a hell of a lot to see your name in the notifications this week. Yeah, and it was really also good to see you for like 5 seconds at the Invitational. Also want to shout out to everybody who came to the Invitational. Going to talk more about that in the closing frame as well. We're currently 11 backers away from that magical 450 mark that is just permanently seemingly out of reach. So here's how we're going to do this. If we can get there by the end of this month, I will stop shilling on the podcast for a month. If we can't, I'm going to erase that option from the board and just try an entirely different tactic and a different set of metrics so that I'm no longer driving myself crazy with that. And besides, how many backers is not actually, I mean, it is very important. How much money is equally actually even more important. So yeah, you know where I'm probably going to go with that. But let's get this thing done. Let's have a June where we don't talk about the frickin' Patreon. Please. All right. Send word out. Bug your friends who use this show but don't actually, pay for it. Remember, not only do backers get the newsletter and access to our Discord, but they also get early access and discounts to our events and the knowledge that in spite of everything wrong with the world, the cost of one grande iced latte a month is enough to keep an independent media operation from disappearing into the ether. If you're not a backer yet, a bunch of you are. Stop talking like talking to like the minority here. Head over to patreon.com/noproscenium and join up. As always, big thanks to our sustaining backers, Samuel Mystery, Chris Woolman, Samantha Davison, Eric Shamlin, Elaine, Daryl, John Boulette, Cameo Wood, Tome Wilson, Jay Bushman, Jerome Joseph Gentis, Kurt Collins, Ryan, David Bassick, Richard Ayers, Lonnie Hands-On, Lecker LeCool, the Ministry of Peculiarities, and Jan Budman. I paused there because I was just thinking about how long Jan Budman has been our backer. It's been like, I think he was like our first sustaining back. Jay and him are like the first sustaining backers. Jay, him, and Lonnie. Can't forget Lonnie. Lonnie, who just whose Cabinet of Curiosities opened up in Denver. Or just outside Denver at the Museum of Outdoor Arts. Anyway, I've broken format. Let's get to the interview. I'll talk to you on the other side. Obviously, I've got a lot to say today. I'm currently sitting across from Rory Mitchell of Mercantile here in the offices of Mercantile somewhere in downtown LA. I won't reveal entirely, so they, no one comes in and steals the tent, which is what we're here to talk about. The tent, which was recently at South by Southwest, and which Rory, who is a friend, I need to fully disclose. We're friends, right?
We're friends.
We get tacos and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, everyone knows I get tacos with everybody, but still, we make plans sometimes to get tacos. And you were just at South by Southwest.
Yes.
With the tent. Right. Like before that, I saw you. We were getting tacos, and Lou Doy, who executive produced. Right? What's Lou's status on?
Yeah.
On this
Yeah. She did both. She did all these things. We are a US-UK co-production, so we were lucky enough to have some of our London contingent over there. As you noticed in the when watching the tent, we have a classic English narrator, a droll Englishman.
You do. It's true.
Who helps guide us through the fairy tale of the tent, which is about a woman who wakes up one morning to discover a mysterious tent has shown up in her front yard. And she's not sure what to do about it, but she's definitely not going to call the cops.
Definitely not going to call the cops. That is the story. Part of this here, there's some layers going on.
Mm-hmm.
Part of this is the how. That South by Southwest, it was shown because this is an AR piece.
Mm-hmm.
Describe for those who haven't gotten a chance to mess with it, how people experience this.
So this is it's an AR narrative. It's 22 minutes long, and after 10 years of trying to put people into headsets, we decided to make this one for mobile first. So it's on iPad Pro.
And what does it mean that it's on iPad Pro? Like the balance of like you've been trying to put people into headsets to put them into virtual reality, and now they're watching through like a kind of a magic mirror, if you will. Sorry, stolen part of the bit.
It is totally a magic mirror. At South by, we actually had some beautiful gilded frames that were made by Amanda Joy, an artist here in Los Angeles, to kind of bring out the fairy tale aspect of it. Do you want me to close that window so you can see?
No. I was just making. Don't worry about that. So just check. Yeah. I'll cut that part, or I won't. So, Rory's been disturbed by the fact that I'm looking at them like,
look at me. I'm talking to you, my friend. I'm telling you about the tent.
No, I want to make sure we were actually recording. Look at the lights.
The professionalism is off the charts.
Oh,
today,
hey.
No, I meant that. What did that sound facetious? That shouldn't have sounded facetious.
It did. This all stays now. Now they made it a bit. So yes, the gilded frames were made by an artist here in LA to create part of the set because it all starts with a magic mirror beat.
Yes, it starts with a magic mirror. We use the front-facing camera on the iPad, and we kind of, initially we just built this we added the whole installation aspect later on, and I credit the Immersive Experience Institute and the No Proscenium cross-pollination with kind of putting all of our location-based people and everybody together. I think it's really made me think about this stuff a little bit more. And I think because of South by, I kind of have started thinking about the tent more in like a location-based experience kind of thing. You know, we've had some folks express interest in kind of trying to distribute it along those lines. And I think it's really interesting. You know, at South by, we had an actual tent set up there, and people would watch part 2 inside the tent. And I was surprised at how much that kind of affected people. But anyways, to get back to like the fundamental experience, we've called it a lot of things. We started out calling it AR, then we called it MR, then it was like an AR cinematic tabletop narrative, trying to just like describe what's going on. But actually at South by, we had so many conversations with people that we've come out of this talking about it in a whole new way and describing it now as a movie that you can walk around inside of.
Maybe like an immersive movie, even
like
Sorry.
An immersive movie, if you will.
Yeah.
But you know, this one's just a tabletop. It's a diorama that takes place like on a table, hence tabletop. But where this is, and you can move all around it. You can get as close to the actor as you want. You can look at it from all angles. You can move freely. You can get high and make it a drone shot. You can get low. You basically have the complete control over the perspective that you experience the story from. And the set is designed, the real world house is, the photogrammetry is so detailed that you can kind of glean aspects of the story from exploring the environment aside from the main story that's happening.
Yeah, like the set deck, particularly in the yard, like there's little things that change from, you know, era to era over the course of the 2 chapters of the story, and it's something that, you know, depending on where your focus is, you might miss. But it also, like, it completely, it comments, right? It lets you have the set deck comment on what's happening in the narrative and in the linear flow. And I love that, because that's something that, you know, immersive does, that theater does, that film can do too. But because you're not usually stuck with one set in a film, the urge to kind of play with that longitudinal environmental storytelling isn't necessarily there, but here you're doing that.
Mm-hmm.
And the other thing is that I was thinking about as I was holding the iPad is I was flashing back to like being at SIGGRAPH, like, I don't know, like 8 years ago or something. It's definitely pre-pandemic, so it's at least 6 years ago, 5-6 years ago, and going around some like Unity, you know, mock-ups of shooting locations with an iPad that like some random company had put together in like the little expo spots. And as I was doing that, I was thinking like, oh man, you could probably do this for storytelling, you know, and people have been sort of scratching at this. And here you are taking these tools, which, you know, some game engines, some photogrammetry, the very thing that people do to virtualize a film set, and then using that as the medium for storytelling itself.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful way of putting it. I mean, I think also the volumetric capture and the photogrammetry combined kind of starts to give us, you know, a direct pipeline to start to translate the broader entertainment and theater industry into this space, because, you know, the volumetric video gives us these micro gestures. And even with, like, you know, the vol cap we did here with a bunch of Azure Connects through a great company called Soar that helped us out with stuff. It's similar to DepthKit. But even here with our kind of indie guerrilla volcap setup, you capture, you know, just the incredible nuanced gesture of our actor, Maddie Wager. They're just an incredible gifted clown performer, and it feels like there's a little woman walking around on your tabletop.
Why this story, first of all, and then I'll ask you why tell it this way. But why this story, or did you start wanting to tell a story this way and find yourself telling this particular tale? This came from my writer Martha Marion, whom I had worked with on
The Visigoths, which was an intimate romantic drama that we made in 2017. It was a 360 video that put you feet away from a young couple falling in and out of love. And, you know, we were fascinated with just that, the intimacy of that. But that whole time we were kind of dreaming of the moment when we could like break out of the shell of 360 video and be able to like get as close to the actors as we wanted. So Martha, before the pandemic, during the last administration, was very involved with immigrants' rights. She was, at the airport showing up for people, and she also, protesting the immigration policy and such. And she also had a lot of, one-on-one encounters with the unhoused population in East Hollywood. And, she's just like braver than I would ever be as far as meeting one person on the street, and, they mentioned that they didn't get to cook anymore. And so she invited them back to her house, and they cooked, and they had a night of it, and they played the piano and they sang. And then it kind of, and then he left, he went home, and then he kind of started texting her, and then things just went a bit awry from there. Yeah. And so she pitched this idea to me. I was immediately taken with it, like having grown up out here, like the unhoused crisis is generations worth of people having gone through that. Yeah. And despite the best efforts of thousands of people, like good, kind-hearted, compassionate people, untold sums of money, we can't seem to like fix it. Yeah. We can't seem to alleviate the suffering. And so part of what drew me to this was the idea that let's look not at the woman in the tent, but at the woman in the house. And what role does the woman in the house play in allowing this to go on? Are we all complicit in this? I mean, this is, it's self-indicting,
There's a couple of roads out of here but the question that I had the entire time was, why the framing it as a fairy tale? And you've sharply framed it as a fairy tale between that wry British narrator, between the beginning where you're dealing with like a magic mirror, kind of in a Snow White motif that way, but also the form of this feels like a fairy tale in the classic sense of like there's a moral dilemma of a particular type, of a domestic type at that, and there are things about this that are uncanny and yet are fully rooted in the most mundane of mundanes. You're nodding because maybe I've answered my own question, but you guys pulled this one off in that way. What was it about using that set of tropes and that framework? What did that afford you to explore here?
I think that we discovered that at some point in the process. I mean, after we had shot the script, actually, we shot the script and then we added the narrator in later.
Oh, wow.
And we realized that in some ways it was kind of a Cinderella story, but a dark Cinderella story. And that the fairy godmother that shows up on the front lawn is actually an unhoused woman, and she's not going to help you find a husband, but she's maybe going to raise some questions about the way you're living your life.
Yeah, there's notes of almost like Rumpelstiltskin in this. Like I'm thinking it looks like the fairy godmother setup, and there's no Baba Yaga-ish moment in here, but there's something of like fairy in the classic sense of fairy. Is like there is this deep other that is, but is also reflective of self.
that is us, that this deep other is somehow our deepest selves. I mean, I think I went to we presented this as a work in progress at a VR festival in Prague called Art VR, which is the first festival in Central Europe, then run by Andrei Moravec, who's just an incredible experience there. And I gave a little presentation about this, and in part of it, I talked about fairy tales in relation to augmented reality or mixed reality specifically, with the idea that, you know, a fairy tale is like a magic mirror that reflects our internal selves in some way. And that in some way, like the way, you know, an augmented reality, take a face filter or something, you hold it up to your face and it shows you as an ogre or a princess, or flip the camera around and you're wandering through the forest and then suddenly you come upon a clearing and there's a little house in the clearing and a little person going about their business in the middle of the thing. So it feels like, I think it's interesting to think about augmented reality and mixed reality in this, specifically in this tradition of uncanny, otherworldly events that suddenly intersect with our banal lived reality.
Well, and then for me, as someone who like studied, you know, Celtic mythology and the Irish myths in particular, right? You start to realize at a certain point that, you know, kind of the otherworldly, you know, uncanny figures, whether it's the Favorians or the, you know, the Firbolg, like whoever came before, you know, the people of Lu, like this is talking about waves of folks coming to the island and who kind of moved in, and waves of colonization and displacement. And so then the idea that the Fae in that sense are people who've been displaced from their land, and that you too could be the next wave to get displaced from your land.
I love that. I feel that building this thread out is really, it's just like, oh yeah, this is a coherent thread.
Yeah, there's something knotty, Knotty in this, right? And you know, this is the madman coming to, you know, the spring and seeing things in the water, but I think that's also part of what, maybe even part of why you guys went for fairy tale that way, is that there are these resonances in there about what's actually going on, like what the role of, you know, those kind of figures are, what they actually represent historically, and there's still that cultural memory built up in the back of our brains.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, and, you know, playing with all the trickster characters from everywhere, you know, I feel that like we throw out trickster a lot, probably too much these days. We talk about tricksters, but
we got a lot of con men, which are a very specific species of trickster. There's that, right? Speaking of the previous administration.
You know, I mean, we were also like trying to see if we could just make this work from like a storytelling perspective, right? And be like, will someone hold an iPad for 20 minutes and be engaged with the story and stay with the story, and whatever kind of trappings we can kind of use to assure people that they are on a path, you know, would just help us with like the fundamental question of like, oh, this is like an experiment in adapting traditional film and theater narratives into a tabletop augmented reality experience.
You mentioned that was one of the things that you had some degree of issue with, even at South by, which is like the techiest of tech conferences, and the music-y of tech conferences too. But you know, ground zero for a lot of Silicon Valley hype for a generation now, and yet there were still people coming through who didn't quite know what to do with the device in this form.
It's interesting. We are so, like, the rectangle is so ingrained in our innermost brains that when something comes out that breaks the rectangle, it takes some prodding sometimes for people to realize that, oh, you can walk around, you can move as close as you want to the actor. You know, a lot of folks kind of would get the iPad and they would start watching it, and they were watching it just as though they were watching like a 2D film. And then especially like early on, before we were at South by, people would like hold it, and then when their arms got tired and their arms dropped a little bit, that was the point at which they would be like, oh, this is something different. Like, and I could like move around entirely with it. And I think it's I won't go off on the rant about like the death of the rectangle and all of this, though I know that No Proscenium is fully aware of the imminent death of the rectangle. And it's not that rectangles are going to like go away. We're always going to have them.
Yeah, it's like radio didn't die. Like video actually didn't kill the radio star.
Yeah.
The iPhone did not destroy television. I mean, it's tried very hard, but like one of my early rants in the early NoPro days was running around. My prop in someone's kitchen would be to pull my iPhone out and say, like, we carry these little prosceniums in our pockets. We view the world through these frames, right? And then how do we break the frame of a story, right? For you, break the rectangle, right? But these are the terms that get thrown around: frameless, borderless, proscenium, right? Like we're understanding this idea that story takes place over there and not here. Like we're safe. We put the story behind up on a screen, but then the allure of like, but if you wear these glasses, the story will reach out to you. Oh, if you sit in this seat, the story will squirt you with water. Like 4DX. Like if you do this, you eat this, the story will colonize your mind with spores. I don't know. Like, but we want that. It's like we want the safety of the frame. We want that picture to stay right where it is, and we're obsessed with the idea that somehow we can either get in or it can get out.
That is something. Yeah, I mean, I think people have been dreaming about this for a long time. I
think it's a fundamental human thing to dream.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, so many thoughts all at once about this. But I think that trying to figure out like what do these new, how will. And I think spatial is really a good term that is like come into this. I think that spatial, thank you, Apple. I think spatial is like describes what's happening here more accurately than, maybe some other terminology. But
I fully concur on that.
But that, like how is spatial storytelling going to change the stories that we tell and how we tell them? Because, I think that even with this, I don't know, I'm very excited to make the next thing because we learned so much in the process of making this, because it can't just be theater. We need to somehow, I love theater and that's, my background, as you know, but, we're trying to, with the tent, we were trying to find a way to keep things moving, keep things dynamic enough that, it can approximate the, just the use of montage and editing and like traditional film and TV that keeps things moving, that maintains people's interest in it. Whereas I think that if it stays too static with theater, we rewrote the whole second half of this. Like the whole second half was originally like a much longer single 8-minute scene. And once we had like gone through this whole thing, spent like a month rendering it volumetrically, we were like, this doesn't work. We need to like rewrite this so that it's a series of shorter scenes that moves quicker and also kind of develops their relationship over a little more time rather than just having it all happen at once. So, I mean, we learned a lot.
Which definitely moves it away from theater. Like theater wants you to sit, watch a scene, play the whole arc out in a 5-minute, 10-minute, 20-minute short, 1-act play and like run it all for the drama. And film wants to let you sense the missing time, right? Like, I mean, and film and missing time, I mean, that is literally the medium itself. Mm-hmm. It's like the illusion of motion through the lack of interframes, right? So this idea that there's something in between this picture and the next, and that is where the continuity of motion is, Oh God, I've had a lot of caffeine today, so I'm in poetic mode. Sorry.
No, that's really, I mean, and then additionally in this, we were trying to maintain the illusion of presence of these objects actually being there on your tabletop. So we didn't just want the house to just disappear.
Right. You use a lot of dissolves in this.
We use a lot of particle effects and custom shaders and, stuff to kind of add, again, another fairy tale aspect. Kind of fairy dust kind of comes in and moves stuff around and helps us move between so that, an object, if I just, in the middle of this sentence, if I just disappeared from this chair that I'm sitting in, we'd all be very confused.
Right.
But if there was maybe like a little effect, you'd be like, oh, he just disappeared.
Yeah.
Don't worry.
Yeah, it was magic.
It was
You know,
magic.
If it felt kind of janky, I'd just be like, oh, I'm living in a Marvel movie right now. So, ooh, did I say that out loud? I'm a naughty boy. Facebook feeds me, and I'm one of those, I'm part of the problem, right? Like I look at the reels they feed me now, and there was some, speaking of particle effects, there was some super cut of like costume transformations and like all the Phase 4 Marvel movies, and it just felt like someone's college graduate school VFX reel, but it was Marvel movies. It was the actual thing, and I was just like, why do they make it look so bad? Like there's no weight to this stuff. Anyway, that's a sidebar. Sorry. Yeah, it's all Facebook's. Everything's Facebook's fault. Particle effects, dissolves. You use those to move the primary character around at points. I was curious here because of the way you volumetrically captured the performance. I have to imagine there was a lot of recreating the spatial relationships between the actor and the objects, like in the computer itself. Is that one of the challenges of making this?
Yeah, that's definitely, that's exactly what happened. Because we captured it here in our little stage, she couldn't walk more than 2 steps at a time. So we just introduced a warping effect where she just kind of flits around. Props we had to kind of put in after the fact. A lot of them we got rid of, but there's one scene where she's got a pina colada she's slurping obnoxiously. So we had to have a 3D animator like track that pina colada into her hand, which took some trickery. But I felt it was worth it.
It's always those little details that cause like the absolute most consternation when you're making something, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's worth it.
Hey, there's a lot. Did you happen to take a look at what she's eating in that scene?
I didn't. I noticed the pina colada, but I didn't get close to see what she's.
Maybe next time.
Okay. Yeah.
Because there's a lot of it's just so much fun to put little stuff in there. Little I remember when I worked in.
I spent a lot of time paying attention during the initial run of food. So
yes.
that's sort of I did all that, and then I was like, okay, I'm over looking at the food at that point.
Yeah.
So the Brown was like, oh wait, am I hungry again? So maybe that's why I didn't look at it. But you were saying you were working.
I spent like 3 or 4 years working in production at NBC Universal and stuff, and like the art department and set deck was always putting just these hilarious. I worked on a show called Andy Barker PI, which was like Andy Richter is like an accountant that solves crimes, and the art department was like putting. There was a point where he goes to the Department of Agriculture, and they put this enormous 4x8 poster of people harvesting coca leaves on the side of the Department of Agriculture. And there was just so much shit like that is so much fun that no one ever knows about. It's like the Melrose Place thing where I forget the artist's name, where they were hiding contemporary art in the Melrose Place set.
I did not know that.
Yeah, it's great.
Classic.
I forget the name of the artist who led that initiative, but it's stuff like that this kind of photogrammetry, environmental capture, free roam, walk through a space, go wherever you want, look at the bookshelf, look at this stuff that it brings. It's so liberating from the directorial point of view. That's either going to be like, look at this thing right now. I'm going to do a close up of this book so you see that she reads poetry, as opposed to this, it's like, oh, she reads poetry, or she's like
that honestly reminds me of gotta make another Facebook reference. I saw someone posted some quote. I did not see who the quote was from. That was basically I can't remember the full. The gist of it was basically directing is actually the art, not the art of telling people what to do, but it's the art of creating a space where the magic can happen, something to that effect.
Yeah,
and that's particularly adept in an immersive sense, in a spatialized storytelling sense, anywhere where the agency, even if the agency that's being handed to the audience is just the ability to traverse around or move the camera of their own accord, is that suddenly, you're not controlling someone's point of view. you're populating someone's point of view with possibilities, and you're starting to let them tease things out. And so that instinct to like play in the art department's, like prankster sense is plays in well there.
Yeah, and it's a theatrical, it's a theatrically informed thing. I've talked with like older directors who are like, but how am I going to show the people what I want to show them? And it's like, well, you just put it up. Like, this is not a,
Yeah. Well, I also think like, because that was like the very first concern, right? Like I remember when VR first started, you had filmmakers. I won't name them right now because I don't want to like go, ha, you're wrong. But I remember interviewing people who were like shortlisted for like technical Academy Awards and whatnot, and right out of the bat they're like, cutting is dead. We can't edit anymore. And then everyone ran with that, right? I ran with that. We were like, oh yeah, like you're looking around 360, to the point where like part of my little intuition or connection between the digital and physical was like being at Sleep No More and being like, oh, this is how the way they managed attention there was like, oh, this is how you do cutting in VR, right? You're managing attention of the audience through spatial relationships, often driven by the social dynamics of the characters, right? You're putting the emphasis that way. That was that key insight that like kind of led to me sitting here talking to you about this stuff. But at the same time, like something like, well, how do you make them pay attention? It's like you go back to the theatrical bag of tricks and you make the scene, the moment that's happening between two performers, really intense. Or you make the set deck compelling in and of itself so that someone's going to want to see, well, why is there this statue here? Or what the heck is going on with that painting? What are they harvesting back there? Oh my God. Right? It's this art of literally building the world, right? That isn't about lore mastery shit, right? I think people hear world building and they think it's like, you got to build the biggest show Bible that ever existed, and then you got to make everyone read your show Bible so they understand what you're doing, because what people really want to do is read Ulysses and then watch a movie of Ulysses so they can understand Ulysses, right? And like, no one wants to do that. Not a single soul wants to do that, right? But if you've built that world, then the environmental storytelling, and you've got the drama going inside the environmental storytelling, and you're thinking about the relationships of the characters to the space, and the space to the characters, and the characters to each other, and the spaces to the spaces, suddenly that's world building. You're off to the races there, and it's not reading Wikipedia.
Yeah, that's absolutely. I mean, I think the opening scene, the tracking shot that goes through the neighborhood, was like is kind of a great example of that, because I think that again, part of what capture of real environments, photogrammetry capture of real environments gives you is it gives you an environment that is like whole and intact and honest in some way, that it's been built up by 10,000 people doing set deck on it, so it's honest. And if you can find a way through that world, so we started out and we scanned the house, producing partner DP Sebastian Ameline and I out there at 5 o'clock in the morning, which is a really like kind of, that stretch of Western, it's pretty funny at 5 o'clock in the morning.
I can imagine. I haven't been out there at 5 o'clock in the morning quite some time, but I can imagine.
And it's fascinating stories from that experience. But we scanned the house, and then we realized, we've got like a little bit of the street down here. It would be cool if we could do like a little floating shot that just went down the street. So we went back and like scanned a little bit more, and then we were like, oh well, now we got just a little bit of this really interesting looking KFC. It would be cool if we could kind of start on Western and then go down the streets. Then we went back and scanned that, and then went back then we're like, well, okay, now we just need to go. So we ended up scanning like 6 square city blocks with like drones and just walking down the street taking photos to do the photogrammetry. And then
didn't use all 6.
No, it's like
so got some spare.
There's some background, kind of on it. It's it's
come in handy later. So,
yeah. It came in. You'll have it. And then Logan Davis, our 3D artist, cleaned everything up and made it work in the space. But once we had that space, then we then that's the narration came after we had scanned the space, and we were like, how would this character interact with this world? What does she think of her neighborhood? Let's see this neighborhood through her eyes. And that's your introduction to the character, is through the environment that she lives in, makes her way, her thoughts on it.
Which is great because you build that relationship right from the start. And I'd be really fascinated to talk to someone who doesn't know that neighborhood, who doesn't have relationships to it, particularly somebody who doesn't know that house. Because one of the things that was funny to me is I realized relatively early on, what I suspected early on, and then it was confirmed as we went on. I was like, oh, I know this house because I've been to an immersive theater piece at this house, which was the capital W piece and the drum, which was inspired by the writer Martha's poetry, ages and ages ago. So it was, a part of me is tickled that this piece of LA immersive theater, 20 teens era, this location is immortalized now in an XR piece. Another part of me was kind of being okay, don't start zoning too close in on the house. Stay focused on the story now. But again, that also then has this it brought another layer of incidental meaning to me. But I think that relationship one has with a neighborhood, or particularly a cityscape neighborhood, you start to know those kinds of beats where, this particularly interesting building, what's the story here? Or a mural over there that has some qualities. And then just the way you learn a lot about the neighborhood and the character all in a go. And that also manages to have this real fairy tale vibe to it. Right. So it's all locked up pretty tightly right there from the start.
Thank you. It's really, it's amazing just what an Englishman's voice does for us in the fairy tale sense, because it creates this interesting juxtaposition and disjunction between the mean streets of East Hollywood and the very kind of he's Greg Moss. He's a brilliant friend, and just nailed. He's a writer and used to be an actor himself, but he got the tone immediately, and it carries so much of the piece. And I think it was interesting showing it to people at South by, because I think a lot of people, they wanted to either talk about the medium, or they wanted to talk about their own experiences with the unhoused and this pressure to try helping, but then you can give no more. And we actually got a lot of interesting stories from people that, but I think the English narrator kind of lulls you into this maybe a false sense of security, but you also you understand that you're being had in some way. You understand that shit is gonna go off the rails at some point.
Yeah, no, it definitely felt fractured fairy tale and not standard fairy tale. There's definitely there's that wryness, right? There's a little. It's not full on Monty Python, but it's definitely.
But it's not Monty Python.
But it's not Monty Python.
That is definitely the English cadence that some of us grew up with.
Oh yeah. You mentioned a bit about having some conversations with some people about activating this in an LBE sense, or maybe it's installation in some places. Where are you in the presentation / development cycle for this right now? What do you hope is the next step, or what is the known next step for the tent?
So we South by was great. It was really wonderful to get to show it to everybody. We got invited to a lot more festivals. So it's actually going to get its international premiere in Paris at the end of April at the New Images Festival.
Very cool.
Which we're incredibly honored to be invited to, and we're excited to share the tent with folks there. And then we'll see what happens next. We built it for. We'd love to figure out a way to get it into a headset at some point. But we built it for mobile so that we could eventually, distribute it through the App Store and give people who may not have a headset, who may not have any interest in having a headset, an ability to kind of get a taste of the magic of spatial entertainment on their kitchen table or at home and start to get an idea for like what the future may hold for storytelling. And I think it's going to be, you mentioned earlier that like we still have radio, but like, something that is equivalent to the leap from radio to television or from still pictures to motion pictures. And that, we're going to teach people how to engage with this spatial content in some way. And that I think people are just, people understand that there could be something new coming. We spend a lot of time talking about how like streaming has disrupted, that streaming is the technology that's disrupting the entertainment industry. But, what if there is something that comes after the rectangle,
Yeah.
So trying to give
can only hope.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's we talk about like second screens and the fact that we're watching TV, but we're on our phones most of the time. Like, there are just so many different things we can point to say like, oh yeah, like we have taken for granted the rectangle's cultural dominance for the last 100 years. And that maybe it's just kind of a technological, historical, blip.
Yeah. Well, I keep on thinking about how well big live events are doing, and sometimes that's a matter of watching video or film footage of it, right? Like, if you weren't someone who got to go to the Taylor Swift concert at SoFi, you can dial it up on Disney Plus and see just how many humans were there and like, oh my God. Or, maybe you're on a wrestling kick again, like a certain person I know, me. And you keep on, and you're seeing how many people are just like filling up the arenas right now.
Yeah.
Because, they're on a hot streak at the moment. But there's also something about going to the concert, going to the show, going to the game, doing the chants, singing along, being part of this something way larger that definitely transcends, I think, a lot of, we did it for the gram. I think a lot of people are so tired, noting more and more people just being like, oh yeah, I forgot to take photos, or I forgot to take video, right? Like it's like, I just want to be here and do the thing. I don't have to perform anymore, right? Like it's going to be really interesting to see Gen Alpha roll up and the inevitable wave. Like what's great about teenagers is, every 7 years, whatever was cool is no longer cool. It can't be because the last group of teenagers was doing it.
Yeah.
So thank God for that. Like clockwork.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that comes back to like human performance, and we love the sphere is cool. That's great. We love the sphere. We love we love IMAX. Like we're just like everything that like the last 100 years worth of entertainment is incredible. But I think there's probably a time 15, 20 years from now when we kind of look back at rectangular content, and it may seem as quaint as like a 1930s fast talking. We still love the 1930s fast talking detective.
I wish we were.
Shit.
I think we all wish we were better at it. I think that's the thing. We've slowed down. Got to practice on.
What do you mean, Noah? What?
The caffeine crash hit during this interview, so now I couldn't. I like the intellectual. The joke is waiting for me there. I'm like, Rory, I can't do it. I can't.
Would you
do
like
it.
some of this tea? Would you like
no,
some of tea?
no.
Okay.
God, I've had 2 cups of coffee this morning, which is a little unusual for me. I had an early peak.
Yes.
I was also up at like 7 o'clock in the morning, so I could have an interview at 8 o'clock in the morning with folks in London. So like, hence I'm later in my day than I usually am because I'm a night person. Rory, thank you for having me down here. Thank you for, putting me through the thing and talking with me. And, I haven't done an in-person in about like 3 or 4 months, and that I get to do the first in-person I've done in a while with you is just an absolute joy.
Thank you for coming down. You've, made LA immersive, strong,
No,
and
stop.
we appreciate it.
I hate when people do this part.
So thank you. Thank you for coming down. It's an honor to get to host you down here, and I'm so thrilled for you to check out the tent, because I know that as a righteous man that you would get it.
I'm a good person.
You are a good person, Noah. A very good person.
It'll make sense. I swear.
Come see the tent.
once again, I want to thank Rory Mitchell for being our guest on the show this week. Check the show notes to connect with the Mercantile and keep an eye out for the next appearance of the tent at a festival, possibly in your neck of the woods. And Rory, don't forget, next time there's one, someone tell us so we can put it on EI. All right. Couple of things before we go this week on this take 3 of the final rant. First off, I want to thank everyone who came out to the Los Angeles Immersive Invitational 2 weekends ago. Always a joy. Big shout out to the After Hours crew, Graham, Michaela, KJ, Sarah, and everyone else from their team whose names I don't have memorized because I mostly deal with those four. But I know Dom and Katie and a few other folks. Someone whose face I always remember, but whose name I never can. I'm sorry. Also want to thank Parker for being our part of our team working on the Invitational this time out. Thanks to Tommy Haunton for coming out and giving advice to the groups. Tommy's done that for the past 2. It's really great. It's really useful. And a big shout out to everyone who played a librarian in our library frame. The theme this year was the Unbound Library. Big shout out to Katie, the head librarian, and also to everyone. The folks whose names I remember are Dom. Of course, I know Jansen and Spencer and Siobhan. And Siobhan had this little storyline going with one of the other librarians. It just really, that kind of played out over the whole course of the day. Just absolutely delightful. Big shout out to all the teams who participated. Go check out some of the articles we wrote to get everybody. But just it was such a wonderful cross section of theater and immersive here in Los Angeles, and just an absolute who's who of folks showing up. Really, just some mega wattage of folks coming through the event, which was to see it, to be part of it. That was awesome, and we're looking forward to exporting this to other cities soon. So keep an ear out for when we do that. I've got a whole bunch of emails I got to write to that effect. Promised you a little bit on Meow Wolf coming to LA. And given that this is the third take of the back end, hopefully I can do one that doesn't spiral out into some weird stream of consciousness thing. So it basically boils down to this. It is hold on. First, yes, I got a quote in the LA Times thing. I'm always proud of when that happens, but I don't like to say it because, I'm embarrassed. But I'm even more proud of I'm even more proud of Todd. You see how that happened. I'm reading a script in my head, even if it's not written. And so then I do dyslexia on the script in my head. I'm very proud of Todd, who, when he interviewed me, gave me no clue that the article he was writing was about Meow Wolf opening in Los Angeles. Should have put that together. He works for the LA Times, but then again, he's written about Meow Wolf in other cities. So I'm like, oh, well, he's on the beat. This is a thing. They know him, of course. Nope. It's because they were announcing here. And I'm very excited that Elizabeth Jarrett is experienced designer on this one, because Elizabeth's work is freaking awesome. I didn't put the explicit tag on this one, so I can't curse. Just really fantastic. And all in the same time, Meow Wolf just laid off a bunch of people a couple of weeks ago, and even skirted the union as part of that process. Didn't live up to the terms of the contract. So it is not an pristine joy. It is important. It is a good thing. I firmly believe more Meow Wolves are a good thing for immersive as a whole and for people in general to get more of this. I also really want the company to get the labor side of this thing figured out so that the artists in our community who are brought in, don't burn out working on this. And I know that in the creative industries, this is the norm. video games has burned people out for 50 years and is only now starting to have union drives. The promise of this field is that we can do it better than anyone else because our work is about people. That extends to the people working on it. And that's a very tall order to deliver on in a world dominated by finance capitalism that wants fast return on its money, that lives quarter to quarter and is willing to spend a bunch of money on stuff that doesn't work in order to chase unrealistic growth. But the funny thing about the Meow Wolf situation is that it's not unrealistic growth. It is growing at a seemingly realistic rate. Yes, there are adjustments in terms of, the staffing should actually be this and not that, etc. And so there are balloon, boom and bust type stuff. But boom and bust as a whole, as a practice for our society, has failed completely. And I know we're in a struggle for the soul of America right now. And it ain't going good. It's going pretty poorly at this exact moment in time from a certain point of view. But the spark is there. The UAW is doing amazing jobs in terms of labor organizing. Equity is out there organizing in places it never organized before. Equity being the actor and stage managers union, right? Things are popping off. Meow Wolf does have a union, right? And that ain't going away. Although in the macro of this election year, maybe labor won't be in as strong a position in about 10 months as it is right now. But I choose to believe, choose to put my focus on a world where we can thread this needle. Not because it'd be nice, but because we have to. We simply have to make this work. We simply have to make a more sustainable entertainment and art field as a whole. From experiential to the movies. We don't have a choice but to do it for the simple reason that the stuff we make, the stuff that our friends and compatriots make, that we enjoy, whether it is a Meow Wolf or a Disney park or a Speakeasy Society show or whatever you're watching on Netflix, it cannot sustain unless there are enough people who are able to afford to go to it. We've got to make that world. We just have to. Otherwise, it's going to be luxury travel bottle service for a small number of people, and everyone else, is just waste. It's just don't need these folks. They don't need to be entertained. You're done. Whatever. That's a very depressing, boring possibility. And honestly doesn't lead to a good outcome for those rich folks, right? It's weird being someone who is like by disposition at heart an optimist, but by training is a realist. So I spend every day in like a big vat of cognitive dissonance. It's not the best thing. I mostly cure it with cookies, which is not the best thing. So I look at this news and I am so stoked that a Meow Wolf is coming to LA. And I hope that that company continues to evolve, that the union continues to be strong, and that the Meow Wolf we all wanted from the jump finally emerges from the fire. Because I believe in the passion and the vision of the artists who are in that collective and the folks who've been drawn there to work and who want to make great work. I see that in all of them. And I want that company, it's a company now, it has been for a while, to support that, to evolve into an organization that supports that and makes it sustainable. And so, it's up to all of us to keep on demanding that as well. All right. This was the third take. I've landed at the same place each time. So I'm putting that out there. Let's do this. That's the end of this week's show. I'll be back next week one way or another. We don't have anything in the can right now. So hopefully I think we're going to record something next Wednesday. And we're scrambling through. There's a bunch of stuff coming. So it's not that there aren't things to talk about or put a feature on. It's that I've been off for over a week dealing with, family medical, as I euphemistically call this giant upheaval in my existence. And none of what we do week to week would be possible without the associate producer of this show is Parker Sella. Music for No Proscenium is by Chris Porter of the Speakeasy Society and Solar the Podcast. Special thanks to Siobhan O'Loughlin for voicing our intro. This thing is my fault. The opinions expressed in here are mine alone. I'm Noah Nelson. And until next time, I'll see you at the show.